Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Champions Chess Tour. This is the grand finale. It is Magnus Carlsen, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, versus Jan Nepo. It is a rematch of the 2021 FIDE Classical World Championship, and the winner of this match will get $200,000. But most importantly, if Magnus wins, he'll have won this for a fifth time in a row, a fifth year in a row, meaning he'll have gone one better than Manchester City. That is my reference for you today. Let's get into the first game. It is Magnus with the white pieces, and it is Jan with the black pieces. Magnus will look to put pressure, and he plays d4. We get knight f6, c4, and what we get out the opening is a pure queen's gambit declined. We did see in his previous match that Magnus did go for a Catalan, but he opts for a pure queen's gambit declined, so we get this move c5. So this is the three knights and sort of a Tarash with this move c5, and you're just striking back at the center. If you're like that, so we get takes, and the mirror image capture, rather than taking back like this and being left with an isolated queen's pawn like this, you rather take. When the queen takes, you capture like this. So this is the position we're left with, and Magnus develops his bishop. Uh, Black is going to look to play around this pawn, rather this pawn, not the queen. They're going to look to play around it. White is going to look to stop it moving forward and then eventually win it. That is what will be deciding this game. Jan blocks the pin. We get e3, opening space for the light square bishop, castles, bishop to e2, h6, and here Magnus takes. He can retreat the bishop. He can retreat the bishop and try and provoke g5, but he decides to rather take, removing a defender of the pawn, and then after you slide the queen back, Jan defends the pawn more in the center. We get castles, queen d7, allowing once this knight moves, one of the rooks will move to that square. We get rook to d1 and the rook to d8, and now we stop the pawn moving forward because there are times where you can sacrifice it. If we go back, there are times, obviously not in this position, where you can sacrifice the pawn, and when white takes with the pawn, then they have an isolated pawn and you can try and win it back because it's got no neighbors. Obviously not in that position, but that is an idea that comes up sometimes. And now look, trying to remove the blockade and secure. So you don't want to take because we just strengthen that pawn. Also, when you get taken, it will be very interesting because what do you take back with? You can't take back with the queen, and then taking with the pawn, now it's no longer easy to attack it. So Magnus here decides, all right, I'll just grab the bishop. So now Jan doesn't have the bishop pair, and I'll slide my knight in like this. Very clever idea. You obviously can't take because you would be down a rook, and Magnus will win this up the exchange with his rook on the second rank, or the seventh rank in this case, I suppose. It would be the seventh rank, so he finds this nice idea to reroute his knight and grab the bishop. Now he's the only one with the bishop on the board. It's bishop versus knight. Magnus loves this type of imbalance, and he slowly goes to work. Gives luft for his king, brings his rook, and now takes space on the queen side. Now he paralyzes this knight because you would get a queen trade, and here probably white's better if the queens come off. So, oh, that was very interesting. Did you see that? I said white might be better, but Magnus is like, no, no, no. If you're going to take, I want you to take me. So very interesting. And instead, Jan goes back. He's like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. And they threaten here a repetition of moves. Magnus can repeat, and Jan can continue to do this. But he brings his queen back. The knight still goes to that square, and now we get c5. Striking at the pawn structure on the queen side, we get take, take. And the knight now gallops to c4, where it's got a very nice outpost. So we remove it off the board. And you look at this, Magnus again. Rook sacrifice of sorts. So the thing is here, the best move according to the engine is queen takes f2. Because it would be king f2, rook takes d2 check, you would take with the rook, and then you would get this position. And this is completely level, and this Jan will hold. What happens in the game, though, he doesn't find that, and he plays rook a8, which is a mistake, because now we get queen, first we get rook a4. Let's be clear here. So the best move in this position is either queen to c2 or queen to e2, getting your queen out of the way. Magnus instead goes for rook a4, and after take, we get this rook endgame, where it's check, you go here, and you win this pawn. But Jan wins this. Now, if Magnus wins this position, he is officially the greatest in-game player of all time. He is the greatest in-game player of all time, but how do you win this? Because the pawns are all on the same side. That's the thing. You might be up a pawn, but they're all on the same side. The kings get in the way. Like, it's very difficult to win this. So let's see how he goes about it. Jan takes space on the queen side. Apparently, it's a mistake. Now, the engine always says white is better. But how? How do you... Well, okay. Now the pawns are split. This is something to work with. When the pawns are a bit more together, they were not as easy to target. But now we've got a big group of 3 and these 2 split pawns. So that's something definitely to work with. And that's probably where Magnus's advantage comes from. As he maneuvers his rook, he brings his pawns up, he brings his king, he doesn't allow too many checks, and he starts to break through. And now he's just up 3 pawns. How did that happen? We just took this one with check and took this one. Jan going for some sort of fortress where he's going to win them back. He wins one back, but he can't win the second one because of various tactics. And he just promotes. Look at this. He just promotes. Yes, you can take my rook. It's the best move to take the rook. And he does, but check. And this endgame is always winning for white. You should find mate here. It says M30, M40. The trick is how. Because the rook sometimes is a very good defender of the king, and you can't pry the rook away. So how does Magnus win this? Let's find out. So he pins the rook, but the king moves out the way. Gives a check, king moves. How do you do it? How do you do it? Because I've been in this position with the queen, and I couldn't win the game. It was very upsetting. So how do we do it? Like this. Jan walked himself where his king was too far away from his rook. If we go back, his king here was too far away from the rook, so he had to come and defend it, and he walked himself into a mating net. Queen to g7 is unstoppable. You have to sack your rook and then get mated. So Magnus wins the first game. So we jump to the next game. Can Jan fight back with the black pieces? The white pieces rather. So we get e4, e5. Magnus going for symmetry, and we get an Italian. Jan's been playing lots of Italians lately, and we get the gioco pianissimo. This is going to be a pure maneuvering game. d6. Oh, and he goes for this. This is some, I don't want to say fancy stuff. This is some spicy stuff, because in the Italian, normally the bishop doesn't go there. You wait later to develop your bishop. Sometimes it goes to e3 to counteract this bishop, because what this invites is h6, and not right away. g5. You are begging black to play g5 and get confrontational. Magnus waits a move. He plays queen to e7. Jan takes space on the queen side. And now look at this. It's a mistake, but you're trying to trap the bishop. That's the key idea. So after a5, the best move. Yes, you can shove this pawn forward, taking space, and boot the knight backwards. But this is very overextended, and your pieces are poorly coordinated. Like, you're trying too hard. You're being too provocative. So the knight jumps into the center, castles, and now the knight jumps to the perfect square. This is in Italian and Ruy Lopez positions, or most e4, e5 positions. You want to land your knight on this square when you're black. Yes, you can play d4, but now my bishop comes to give a pin. So your queen can slide out the way. Look at this, long castles. We don't go short, we go long, because you've locked everything up on the queen side. So how will you ever get to my king? And now I will play g5, and I will get to your king. Rook e1 and g5. And look at this. Magnus just calmly starts bothering Jan and bringing his pawns forward. And now he's +2, and Jan tries to do things. Magnus tried to trade queens, and he's just going to bother him on the king side. Look at this. Brilliant move number 2 of this match. You can take my queen. The problem is, if you take my queen, I go here. This is the only move, and then I go here. And this is winning. That rook hangs. This bishop is under attack. Everything falls. It's just a problem. You completely lose. So what a move by Magnus. Jan defends that fork threat, and now we move the queen out the way, and we just break open the center of the board. You finally created half a threat, which is already defended. I just bring the rooks through, and I mop up everything. Everything gets mopped up, and Magnus wins again. He's up 2-0. He's going to go 5 out of 5, isn't he? Well, let's have a look. It's not over yet. They play 6 games, so Magnus has to get to 3.5. Let's have a look what happens in this one. We get a Sicilian defense, not d4, knight f6, e4, c5, and Magnus plays this, which is almost like now it's an Alpen. Officially, it's an Alpen, but if like this structure, if you play e6 and go for d5, it turns into a French. So he takes, the knight comes out, and this is an Alpen. This is now an Alpen. You've not played e6 to block in your light squared bishop, so you can always strike with d6. We fianchetto the bishop, and we just play this position. We just play. We're developing the pieces. Jan gets his knight booted to the side of the board, but he'd like to take the bishop. Magnus says you can take it, so he does. And we get the knight being pinned. And then this move doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't understand this. Okay, you're attacking that pawn. But, like, I can just go here, can't I? Or I can take the knight and ruin your pawn structure. Well, I suppose that blunders fork. So we move the rook. And now we ruin the pawn structure. And now we slide the queen back. Like, this queen's coming in this way. Obviously not to that square. But, it's coming in this way. It's coming to f5, maybe. Magnus plants his knight in the center. Jan kicks out the bishop. The bishop retreats. And now you see the queen comes in. And now the knight's coming in. And now it's a mistake. Jan was level here. But the preferred move is e5. It's like, yes, this pawn is now completely passing. But you boot out the bishop. And you get bishop to d2. And then b6. It wants this. It's like, let's get the knight there. Let's bring the rooks. Just don't worry about it now. But Jan doesn't do that. He brings his knight forward. The bishop retreats. And now we get the rook to d8. The knight gets kicked. It goes to f6. Take. And here. And Jan is now better. Magnus made a mistake. He shouldn't have been greedy and taken the pawn. The knight jumps into the center. The king slides over. Magnus slides his king over because this is a fork. But you just take. Like, the knight's not going anywhere. And Magnus is making some mistakes. Jan is now much better. But Magnus, one of the best defenders. Look at this resource. Does it work? Kind of. Because take, you would play queen d8. And the rook hangs, obviously. So you obviously can't take. But we take that rook. And now king to h7. Now I can take this. Because even though you grab this, I'm fine. The knight retreats. We get the pin. The king slides over. And this rook comes in to defend that pawn. And the queen slides back. And oh, no. Not the most accurate move. Jan, here the best move was knight to h4. Threatening checkmate. And what it wants here is knight to d2. Where the queen opens up to protect that square. And the knight can always return to try and block. Or trade itself. Instead, he plays queen to h5, and it allows Magnus to build what he always says is impossible, a fortress, especially when Jan here, again, is better. Magnus wasn't perfect. The only winning move here to give proper advantage is g5. You've got to be nerves of steel to play g5. Like, your king just gets opened up on this diagonal. Yes, there's no light squared bishop, but that needs some nerves of steel. To play g5. He doesn't, and Magnus now consolidates. And even though both sides make a couple of mistakes in time pressure, this game eventually, after some trades, boils down to a draw, where the players continue to harass each other. But this is just a draw. As it gets traded to this, neither side will really lose this. And they go, and they go, and they continue to play, and eventually they will agree to a draw. Although here, was it? Okay, yeah. So here Jan was winning again. Sorry, I knew I missed something. So these endgames are not easy. Magnus here makes a mistake. He plays king to e3, which is a mistake if you play king c4. You've got to bring your king in, block this guy from getting in, and then you can go and try and win this. Uh, and Magnus makes it worse in the next move because Jan goes the wrong way. He should have gone this way. And here, he's completely winning, but Magnus makes a worse move. He plays king to d4. And Jan is now completely winning. If he plays king b6, but that's not even the key idea because he plays it. King b6, king to e5, and look at this. That's not the right idea. Just take this pawn. He's probably worried about Magnus getting in here, but you just play bishop to b4, and you will be fine. You've got to have nerves, and you've got to let this pawn go through. Let Magnus take all of this, you will promote. Instead, he plays here, we get this, and now it's back to a draw. So Jan misses a chance, another chance that Magnus gave him, and eventually we get all the way here where the knight falls, and we are left with kings. So Jan misses a chance, but he's on the board. So it's 2.5 to a half. We go to game 4. Jan now plays d4. I don't know why. Jan is an e4, e5 player. I suppose he got outclassed in that in the second game. So he goes to d4, knight f6, and we get a Nimso Indian. Sharp, sharp stuff. This is the ultimate test of the white opening repertoire. This is the sharpest thing you can play. If you want to avoid this, like Magnus did, you play knight to f3. So Jan invites this, and the key idea is you sometimes get the bishop pair. Not the way this has been played. You see the c5 move again, like from game 1. And the key idea is, yes, you waste tempi with the bishop, because it went there, it's going to go there, and it might come back. But what's this knight doing here? You've kind of set up stupid, and you say, white wastes time. I keep the bishop, and we get to a level position. That's the ultimate idea. Black levels this position very easily. So what do we have here? They develop some pieces. There's no real targets. You've got to create them yourself, which is not easy. You've got to induce like this, inducing this pawn. So it went here, and then it went here. So maybe wasting some time, but it's still level. So we take, and look at this. Nice move, but we take. And now h3, giving king left. And the eval bar just does nothing this whole game as they trade some more pieces. Lovely move here. Hits the bishop, hits the rook. So when you move the rook out the way to the wrong square, just by the way, the best move here was bishop takes f6 because you hit the queen. So it would be queen f6, and rook to c2. This is what the engine wanted. I think this was the best way to hold. Instead, Jan goes here, and after the queen moves, we take this pawn, and we trade queens like this. So Jan does end up a pawn, but loses the bishop, and there's a check. You've got to block with the knight. Now this knight is passive forever, and Magnus is just in time to play a4, shutting down this b pawn moving. And even though you can create left for your king, Jan and Magnus is just in time, and you get nothing. The pawns get traded, and this time there will be no endgame magic from either side. This is just a draw. Although Jan maybe had some advantage here, had a bit more advantage if he played h5, because it stops the king going here, it stops the king's mobility, and then maybe you build up for this. Because the white rook is stuck here. So you've got to try and maybe get some play going on the queen side with your king. And this king can't go too far because you give a check if he gets too far away, and then you promote. That's always the eternal problem. The black rook is stuck defending that pawn. So we get f4, you can't take, and this is just, yeah. Now look at this, and they repeat moves, kind of, or they agree to a draw. Jan's now got 1 point, Magnus has got 3. Magnus needs a half point to win. So Jan must win this next game. This is do or die for Jan Nepomniachtchi. Magnus goes back to d4, and Jan plays e6. This is an invitation, which Magnus accepts, to play the French defense. Magnus plays what we had in the World Championship with knight to c3, knight to f6, and we've seen this all before in the World Championship. This was played between Ding Liren and Gukesh several times. And here we get a3, which is what Gukesh played the second time around when he entered this line. a5, the move Ding should have played, and then knight to f3, a4, and h4, and we get this. This is what they go for. So in the French, you play to lose and you play to win. It is so imbalanced because this bishop is stuck. It's the bad French bishop. But black looks for quick play on the queen side. You can see they've pushed the pawn all the way to a4. So it shuts down b4, b3 all the time. You look to strike in the center with taking like this, and sometimes when you can get the b pawn going like this, your dark squared bishop comes out, and you're just like, okay, white's going to come this way, I'm going to come this way, and someone's going to lose, and someone's going to win, and sometimes we knock each other out and it ends in a draw. So bishop to e7, the bishop slides over, and the knight comes to f4. And Magnus's game plan is simple. We just attack the queen side. A draw is fine. So that's one of the hardest things to play in chess, is to play to not lose, because sometimes you don't make the objectively best move. You want to just play for a draw. But Magnus has been goated here into a fight by Jan, because Jan needs to win. So there's nothing else. So we get take, take, and the knight comes in, and h3, and Magnus is just clearly winning. Magnus is completely winning. This position is untenable, and it gets so untenable that we get f5, and Magnus is plus 5. It's move 20. Magnus is 7 minutes 30. Jan is 2 minutes 39 seconds. And Magnus is plus 5 and point 0.3. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were supporting Jan Nepomniachtchi, I'm sorry to tell you that he loses in 23 moves. And Magnus Carlsen is, say it with me now, a 5-time champion, 5 years in a row, better than Manchester City, better than Real Madrid. Magnus Carlsen, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, $200,000 richer. He wins the Champions Chess Tour 2024. What else can you say when describing the best in the world? Get out of here.